Hey guys, what's happening? So we are back for more of our coverage on the 8 deaths of Spider-Man, where in this one we find out how death killed Spider-Man. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so coming back, this picks up at Sidorak's throne room, just after Peter's match with Syra, where she was defeated by Peter, only for her brother Calix to jump in and kill him right after. And of course Peter came right back because of the reeds of Ragador, but this totally broke the rules with Calix attacking Peter out of turn. So now amongst his other siblings in his father's throne room, Calix is trying to brag to his father. And like I said when we saw it happen, Sidorak is not pleased. And so this has Calix walking away with much embarrassment, as the Scions move on for the next sibling to challenge Earth's champion. But before we see where exactly this goes, we head back over to Peter for a moment, where after Cyrus showed Peter the deaths of everyone he knew, as well as the deaths of many others who Peter would never meet, and we'll find out how many deaths Peter saw in a little bit, because the number of deaths that Peter saw, it's pretty important when it comes to answering the question of why he's basically given up. And it's not even so much a thing of justification here, to be like, well, okay, well, how many deaths does it take to get to the center of a Spider-Man? But it's more so a thing of understanding where Peter's coming from, and we'll unpack this whole concept more and more along the way. But coming back, we pick up with Peter, who had just told Doctor Strange that he's done. He no longer wants to be Earth's champion, and how it's pointless to try to save the world since everyone's just gonna die anyway. And so when Peter walks out, Phil Coulson, who's currently Death at the moment, because when Death became an Infinity Stone, he was chosen, though he's still not exactly sure why. But with Doctor Strange being able to see Phil, which is surprising to Phil nonetheless, Strange basically tells him like, hey, you gotta talk to this kid. And at first, Phil's like, well, you know, I can't be out here taking sides. So Strange basically tells him like, look man, you're Death, not the Watcher, so you gotta do something. And right there's like, come on man, we gotta be honest. How many times has being the Watcher stopped the Watcher? But nonetheless, Strange goes on to tell him, the kid's just experienced thousands of deaths, maybe tens of thousands. If anyone knows what that's like, it's you. And this eventually leads to Phil going to have a talk with Peter. But we'll find out in a little bit the number of deaths that Peter saw, it's a little more than tens of thousands. But again, with Phil not really knowing why he was chosen to be Death, for a moment here he thinks like, okay, well maybe he was chosen for this specific moment, to talk to Peter and change his mind, and get him back on the saddle so to speak. But when Phil comes to talk to Peter, he really doesn't know where to start. So for a moment here, Phil ends up taking the approach of telling Peter about his very first experience with Death, which happened when Phil was 6 and he found his grandfather who had died in his sleep or something. But even though this initially comes off as Phil just trying to connect with Peter and tell him how death is a part of life and how it's affected him before, it ends up becoming something real crazy that we'll see in a little bit. But as Phil goes on to tell Peter about the different deaths that he's experienced as a way of trying to connect with Peter, eventually Peter's like, I get it. You're here to try to coach me through this moment, but you don't even know me. So at first Phil is like, sure I do, you're Spider-Man. The amazing, spectacular, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. You're a hero. But after everything Peter has seen and everything that Syra has shown him, he now believes that he was foolish to even try to be a hero. When the truth is, all he's done is fought bad guys, invited calamity, endangered his loved ones, when at the end of the day it changes nothing. Because the way he sees it, all he's doing is delaying the inevitable. So this has Phil like, you're right, I don't know you. To know you, I'd have to see your life through the people you've lost. And eventually Peter's just like, alright, let's get on with it. Because he knows at some point Phil's getting ready to show him this montage made from all these different memories to try to wheel Peter back in. And so Phil does, and this takes them through a number of different memories of the people who Peter's lost, where in many cases these are examples where lifetimes of love were taken from Peter. Whether it was his parents, Richard and May Parker, Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, or her father, Captain Stacy. But this quickly turns into more of a teaching moment for Phil than anything else here, because eventually he realizes the different deaths and all the loss that Peter's endured, collectively they all have had a purpose. And eventually it comes to the point where Phil wonders, had Peter not experienced the loss of these different loved ones and friends alike, would Spider-Man have been able to save as many lives as he has? So essentially this is Phil coming to understand how tragedy has made Spider-Man the great hero that he is. And had he not experienced the loss and the deaths that had happened throughout his life over the years, who's to say that he would have had the strength to persevere as much as he has? But for Peter, seeing this handful of moments, which to be clear is a lot for one person to go through, he's really not fazed by any of it. And if anything, this is more of a teaching moment for Phil than it is for Peter. And it starts to take a bit of a crazy, unexpected turn here, because eventually Peter's like, stop. None of this matters. None of it means anything. Everyone dies anyway, and usually it's awful. You of all people should know that. So again, this has Phil wondering why the Death Stone chose him. Cause just a moment ago, he was like, yeah, I'm gonna have this talk with Peter. He's gonna be motivated. He's gonna start back being Spider-Man, but none of it panned out that way. And it's here we're told, Coulson could not see why the Death Stone had chosen him out of everyone. But a glimpse into the hardships that Peter Parker has endured forces him to reckon with his own shortcomings. There's a locked door in his memory, and Peter has shown him how to walk through it. And what this ends up doing is taking us back to Phil's first encounter with death when he was 6, and uncovering the part of that memory that had been locked away. Because way back then when Phil's grandfather died, he saw death. And at first death told him how interesting. Only a handful of beings have ever been able to see me when I have no intention of being seen. Why, you wonder? Why are you able to see me now? You have no power that I can detect. You are neither mutant or telepath, nor any special thing. Perhaps you will be able to explain this when next we meet Philip Coulson. So at the time, the young Philip asked if his grandpa was in heaven, and he was told what happens after death depends on who you are. So I will not answer that for you. But what I will say is that when your grandfather died, a version of you that only he knew vanished from the world. All the stories and thoughts and memories he had of you, that only he had of you, are now gone forever. You should feel diminished. You should feel less than. This will happen to you over and over. But when you die, and you will join with all of those different versions, becoming not only the person you were, but the person you were to other people. People are scared of me, but they have no reason to be. I am simply what awaits. So at the time, the young Philip said, I'm not scared of you. And death told him, perhaps you are special after all. And so with Phil having this memory unlocked, and with him seeing all the tragedy that Peter's been through, it causes him to realize how the moments of life shape us. And as far as the tragedies and trials, death of loved ones and misfortunes, hardships and setbacks that strike the marble, and eventually the shape beneath is gradually revealed. And in Peter's life, this is how the universe built Spider-Man. Strong, durable, kind, and compassionate, a man with an understanding of his true responsibility. But this covenant did what years of tragedy could not. Death after death after death, beyond what even death himself sees daily on this planet. The Reeds of Ragador saved Peter Parker, but death killed Spider-Man. Which right here just goes back to what I mentioned, because this is what helped Phil understand where Peter's at. Or I'll even say understand to a degree, because the most Phil can do is empathize with Peter, because Peter's seen more death than Phil, and Phil is death, which says a lot. But all of this is chiseled away so much from Peter that is basically chiseled away him being Spider-Man. So from here, when we go over to the Amazing Spider-Man issue 66, which right away makes it look like Peter's been sitting on this building eating pizza from sundown to sun up. It's here where we find out that it's gotten so bad that Syra's actually reached out to Doctor Strange. And part of it has to do with her trying to wrap her head around what's even happening here. She tells Strange, this human is nothing like you. He never truly attacked me, and he never gave up. When we fought, which is Syra referring to herself and Strange, when we fought, you would detach. This champion, referring to Peter, grieved each life, even those he had never met. Irritating. And so Strange's like, yeah, that's one word for him. And from here, they go on to follow Peter around for a bit. And for Peter, who's really numb more than anything else, he makes his way out to grab a bite because nothing else really matters. But when he does, he ends up finding out that this guy Kenny, who he saved back in issue 60, had passed away. And hearing this now just has Peter like, oh well, it's just one more reason to quit, because the guy just ended up dying anyway. But while Peter's here getting some ice cream, this dude holds up the store. And again, Peter, he's not trying to stop this guy. He's not even worried about the clerk being held at gunpoint. He's very much on some I missed the part where that's my problem kind of energy. But he does end up telling this guy who's trying to rob the place that what he's doing is stupid. Because he tells this guy, like, you're gonna get caught, you're gonna go to jail. And for what? The $64 in that register? Because no one uses cash anymore. And Peter tells him, you're going to give up 5 years of your life, and you can't even buy a video game. All this, and for what? A system that gives us a few billionaires and leaves everyone else scrambling for pennies, and then you die. And your family has to have a bake sale to bury you. It's a broken world and a broken system. And the only way to win is to not play at all. And after that, he basically just tells this guy to go get a job. And it's just kind of like, man, Peter really doesn't care no more. But it's not too long after this where Spider-Boy shows up. And he takes care of the guy who was trying to rob the place. And Peter's just like, okay, can I pay for my ice cream now? And after he leaves, Spider-Boy goes to check on him because he knows something's not right. And when he asks Peter, are you alright? Peter just kind of brushes him off by telling him, I'm fine, Spider-Boy. Just done lying to myself. It doesn't matter how hard you work, you can't change things. Which is a stark contrast to where things were between these two just before the 8 deaths of Spider-Man kicked off, because Peter is basically a mentor to him, training Bailey, showing him the ropes, forgetting his age. And I mean, that last part hasn't changed because Peter keeps forgetting how old this kid is. But one thing Peter can't forget is the image of Bailey dying. So he basically just tells Bailey to give up the whole hero thing and go somewhere and be a kid. And Peter even tells him that he should go somewhere and play tag or something. Like, do 10-year-old kids still play tag? Tekken tag maybe. But right here Spider-Boy tells him just because you're sad doesn't mean you give up. You have to keep trying because things can get better. They do get better. And it's just like, oh, look at Spider-Boy sounding like a Spider-Man. But Peter just shuts this down and he tells Bailey, sadly, they very much do not. Sorry. And again, when we see Syra and Strange, we're basically just watching all of this with Peter. And there's a moment here where Syra asks, what is he doing? Because part of this for her is a curiosity of human behavior. So Strange just tells her that he quit, which isn't normal for him. But then Strange is like, I could ask you the same thing. Like, isn't your part of the challenge over? And she more or less tells him like, yeah, it is. But she doesn't care about that, which is what we knew from before. But now she's asking herself, why does she care about him? Why does she care about Peter? Which from here ends up taking us over to Times Square, with Peter asking Shay to meet him there. And the thing with Shay and Peter, it's complicated. They've been dating for a while, but it's not official. And what ends up happening when she gets here, she's kind of pissed because Peter's been distant for weeks, he's ghosted her, and now out of the blue he sends her a text asking her to meet up. So at first she's only come here to let him know that she's not going to put up with being treated that way. So Peter more or less tells her that he understands, but he just wants to ask her one question. And that's when Shay starts to realize that Peter's not okay. So he ends up asking her, since she's a nurse and she's lost people in her life and at work and has still managed to continue and go back to work, he asks her how does she do it when it all feels so pointless. So she tells him a story of how she's worked with people that she's cared about, only to eventually lose them. And it did make her want to quit at one point, but eventually she realized regardless of whatever career path she would have chosen, she likes helping people. So she goes on to tell him there's a saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Peter, find a professional to talk to, and good luck. I hope that helps. Just before she walks away. And Peter just stands there for a moment before he's like, it doesn't help. Because Peter has seen more death than death. And I mean Phil Coulson death. Because he's still fairly new on the job. But even still, he's working full time, so that says a lot. But following this, we head back to the X-Men headquarters in Alaska, where we get an update on Kane Marco, the Juggernaut, who we last saw in issue 63, just get up from a gaming session and leave telling everyone he's gotta go prepare. And even though at that time, we knew because his connection to Sidorak that it had something to do with the challenge, but we didn't know if he was gonna be siding with Peter or with the Scions. But as it turns out, when Cyclops and Psylocke go to check on him, he tells them that they have to get to New York now, because the world, everyone, is in danger. And at first Cyclops has his suspicions, but it's not long before him and Psylocke make preparations to gather the team and head out there. And right now, back over with Peter, we find him just outside of Felicia Hardy's apartment, more or less talking himself out of going to see her, but she ends up seeing him outside her window, just kind of in his own thoughts, so they end up having a talk. So of course Felicia asks Peter why he's outside of her apartment in his regular clothes. And right away he just lets it out. He tells her, I saw you die, Felicia. I saw everyone die. And it did nothing. The world went on. And so keep in mind, Felicia, she knows about the whole challenge thing, okay? So she tells him here, everyone dies, Spider. That's how the story ends. You won the challenge though, right? And Peter's just like, I didn't lose, but I lost. And I don't think there can ever be a win, ever. And I can't keep doing it, any of it. And I'm telling you, the way that Felicia turned her head and was like, and you came here, why? It's like, man, if you don't get back out there and save the world. But this ends up giving way for the opportunity for Peter to let out some of what he has going on inside. Because he tells her here, when we first met, you'd ask me why I did what I did. I always had an answer. Sometimes I felt a little stupid and naive back then. I feel really stupid and naive now. Correction, I don't really feel much of anything right now. So she tells him here, you have to know, no matter how bad things get, there is still good in the world. Just before she leans in to give him a kiss. And much like what we saw earlier, both Doctor Strange and Syra, they're still following Peter and watching from afar. And it's here where Syra tells Doctor Strange, I thought I understood you humans, but I judged all by you. And he is not like you. This new champion has shown me how little I understand. He seeks to find comfort in the one whose loss will destroy him. It's a contradiction, bereft of logic. So Strange just tells her that's humanity in a nutshell. and Peter is humanity. And it's right here where we get the magic number, because now Doctor Strange, he asks Syra, what did she do to him? And she tells him, nothing I didn't do to you, just more of it. So Strange is like, how much more? And that's when Syra tells him the last time they met, Doctor Strange endured 809,000 deaths, while Peter endured 3 million. And he didn't drop the spear even then. So it's like, man, now that we know the number, it kind of gives us an idea why neither Doctor Strange or Phil were able to get through to Peter, by way of more or less trying to tell him that they know how he feels, or they know what he's going through. And I know there's going to be that one person who's like, well, Doctor Strange, he's seen as many deaths if you add all the years up together. And that's like me saying, well, how many push-ups have you done in your life? Thousands? Well, okay, do all those push-ups right now, because something happening over the course of time isn't the same as it all happening at once. So it makes sense why Peter's at his lowest here. And Syra even notices after Peter broke, he couldn't help but to seek connection. And she goes on to say, I must know why. But following this, the next thing we do is head over to her brother Calix for a moment, who's traveled far from the Crimson Court beyond the casket with his crimson canines. And much like before, Calix, who's desperate to prove his worthiness to his father Sidorak, and he's basically looking to do the same thing here, but instead of looking to do it by way of approval, he's looking to show that he's the best of his siblings, by way of traveling into this forbidden area to discover why his father doesn't want them to come here and defy whatever he finds so he can prove his strength. And this ends up leading him to the Blight. And basically what happens here, Calix faces the Blight and he survives without his father's help. And because of that, not only does Calix believe that he doesn't need his father and that he can make it on his own strength, but now he also knows why Sidorak fears this place, because his father fears the loss of control and the fading of his power. And because of that, Calix goes on his own whim, and he makes his way to have a talk with his brother, Kratos, who's the next scion of Sidorak that Peter is supposed to be facing. But when he arrives on Earth, he sees no champion. So for a moment here, he's like, a victory without battle is a hollow one. Will no one fight Kratos? And as soon as he says that, the Juggernaut's like, we will. The X-Men accept your challenge. As he comes through with Temper, Kid Omega, Magic, Cyclops, and Psylocke. And I ain't gonna front, this had me looking at the rule book like, okay, what are we doing again? And I mean, I'm not sure if this is because Calix broke the rules, so anything goes now. And I mean, I doubt that's what it is, because the Juggernaut was called here way before that happened. But either way, what I do know is that this is leading to a pretty big twist that's around the corner, and I can't wait to see it. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.